So I think that a lot of people in this room know who Mike is. But as I've gone around to other places asking who knows who Mike Markkula is, not very many people do, which is always a surprise to me. When people know about the founding of Apple, they know about the two Steves, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, in the garage in 1976. And what they don't know is that there was somebody else who owned a third of Apple, and that was Mike Markkula. And the way that Mike's story came to me, luckily we had gotten friendly after my first book, which was a biography of Bob Noyce, who was a really important friend to Mike. And so since I do a lot of history, I knew that there were so many of these little startup computer companies all over the valley, also, all over the country, right? And they all had their brilliant engineer, not as brilliant as Woz, perhaps, and their brilliant sort of marketing guy, not as brilliant as Jobs, perhaps. But what was it that made Apple come up? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, and he would say, well, there were a lot of people, and that's true, there were a lot of people. One of those people was Mike, because when you look at Apple in 1976, Steve Jobs was 21 years old. He had 17 months of business experience in his entire life, and that was working as a tech for Atari, for Al Alcorn, as a matter of fact. And Steve Wozniak, he wanted to stay an engineer at Hewlett-Packard. He didn't want to start a company. So how did those two guys end up at the youngest company ever to hit the Fortune 500? And the answer is that Mike came in and he brought with him a cadre of people from the microchip industry, including Gene Carter, who I know is here. And if you look at Apple's S1, when they went public, you had, you had the president, the VP manufacturing, the VP marketing, the VP sales, the CFO, the VP HR. You had several of the major investors, like Venrock, like Sequoia, all brought in by Mike through his connections to the semiconductor industry. And that, to me, is a story that is just remarkable, that people didn't know that. And it goes back to what I was saying about the importance of building on what came before. How foolish would it have been to feel, for those two guys, to feel like, we're going to do it ourselves, because everyone else around them tried to do it themselves, and they didn't have the same success.